Today's opening session is all about how to drive more thoughtful, honest, and equitable narratives about boys and young men of color and their families. Si eres como yo, you might find yourself spending some time on social media, just a little bit, and you've likely seen some pretty problematic images and stories about people who look like me, who look like us. Let's break barriers and go.
Thank you, Alejandro. In Yonkers, New York, our MBK community is on a mission to change those narratives. In partnership with Ravensbourne University in the UK, the MBK community put together a short film that showcases the power of narrative change in shaping our ideals and our actions. So up next, you're gonna have the opportunity to review a short clip of that film, and then afterwards take part in a conversation with pop culture expert, change maker, and Sirius XM host, Mike Muse. Let's give it up for Mike and the filmmakers in the chat.
With skies blue and clear, I start my day carefree and with no fear.
Our journey to work in strides, but confused when I'm avoided as she crosses to the other side.
Side-eyeing me like I did something wrong, but you know what? I'ma leave it. It's no problem. With somewhere to be, I patiently wait, but this
somehow has bothered the person next to me.
There's nothing I did wrong, my face just takes up space.
Where you think I don't belong, so you move
to the rhythm of your deep-seated hate while I remain behind.
Face was what's left on my plate.
Ready to put in a shift at my place of work. Entering the lift and I've left space for her, but
she's clutching her bag and assuming I want what she has.
She has bias and a fear she's created in her
head filled with divisive hate. But maybe I'm making it up. Maybe she's having a bad day.
Finally getting to work and catching up with my mates, but
of course I'm greeted with an invasion of space.
Space is granted to those who are respected, yet for some reason my rights are neglected.
Something in this voice bothers you, but you're too naive to confess it, aren't you?
You aren't ready to explain that the sounds coming from this body are too reminiscent
of what you told yourself I would be.
You see, being silenced in spaces where others can speak is the same old oppression.
Same story, it's antique. Maybe you hired me to tick some boxes and reach your diversity threshold. So here I sit
in the boardroom with engaging perspective on my hands.
Hands that are invisible to your eyes are abandoned in the air. Maybe
my idea wasn't good enough, perhaps, but I remember
this is the third time it's happened today. So I see it as more than coincidence.
My skin tells you to keep an eye on me, so you follow suit.
Suited up to trail behind a person free of conviction.
Maybe it's because you convinced yourself that I'm up to no
good will come from this interaction.
Is tired and sinister,
but if I ask, you say you're just doing your job.
Seated with time to myself, thinking of whatever I please.
Could you help me out with this? A need for help is all I see.
I wasn't considered. Who I am means I've been overlooked. A pill I
don't want to swallow, but I will. Being myself is all it took.
I would have been amazing with the right opportunity, but you continue to look past me
to the others who don't even qualify. I don't understand why.
You decided to treat me differently, to hire me.
What did or didn't I do to be the right version for you?
Is it because...
What's up, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse, and I am so excited to be in conversation with you today. What an awesome honor and what an awesome privilege it is that we are all being able to be assembled here today to have incredible conversations over the next 2 days on so many great issues that are affecting us in our society today. I am a big fan of creative work. Those who may or may not be familiar with my work know that I love using pop culture, music, film, television, sport in order to deconstruct social issues of our society and our time. I believe pop culture, in particular film and art, holds up a mirror to our society and makes us look within and wrestle with very uncomfortable moments, uncomfortable dynamics, uncomfortable things. And it's through that we have to face it in a very creative way. But I believe that is the best way to moderate social discourse. And in particular, as we think about what we're going to talk today about is changing the narrative. What does that mean, changing the narrative? On my shows, I often talk about the ways that Black boys and young men of color are often characterized. We aren't allowed to show range of who we are. We're either the athlete or the rapper, but we're no more. We're never allowed to show emotions. We're never allowed to be vulnerable. There's this hyper masculinity that's associated with Black men and men of color. And also, too, there is association when it comes to young men of color that we're never seen to be the juveniles that we are. We're always seen to be 30, 40, 35, 28, 21, when we're really just 10, 11, 12, 9. But it's because of these tropes within media and within pop culture that we're perceived much larger than we are, much bigger, much scarier, much more aggressive. And then by default, we play into that character because that's what male identity is. That's what male masculinity is. And so we have assembled some fantastic panelists today who are much smarter than me to help really guide us in this conversation of changing the narrative. Really, what does that mean to change the narrative? Because I'm looking at you, politicians, elected officials who are on this call. I'm looking at you, policy wonks. I think I can say wonks. I'm a policy wonk. I love policy. We're looking at you, change agents, community builders, leaders of nonprofits, community members, those who hold all of us accountable, including myself, who's in the media space, to change this narrative. Because when we look at young men of color differently, we're able to create better narratives. We're able to create better music, better films, better ways to cover it, better ways to tell the story, and better ways to create policy. to really impact change. That video you've seen is coming from two of my panelists. I mean, there's something scripturally that says, and the child shall lead the way. What Lisa Hooper and David Amra have done and did with that film property, they're part of this cultural exchange to show really, you take two individuals coming from the UK, here coming from the United States, and show that we also have the same lived experience. It really is how we present and show up in society that causes this inflection point that makes us look different. So I'm gonna stop talking because the panelists have so many great things to say. And I'm gonna start with the youth. I'm gonna start with Lisa. I'm gonna start with David. Lisa is from the UK. She's in university over there. She's a cultural exchange with David Amra, who is based here. I'm in New York City. If you guys knew that, you didn't. I'm in New York City, based right here in Yonkers. So I want to pull up first Lisa and David. What is happening, my good people?
Hey.
Hello.
First of all, I mean, how does it feel to have a property, a short film that you guys made streamed on this platform, i.e. the President of the United States' platform? That's nuts.
Crazy.
So it's amazing, absolutely amazing.
I love it. Look at this Black girl magic and Black boy joy. David, you better smile. Look at you changing the narrative already. Talk to me about that smile and the importance of people seeing Black men smile and how you brought that out in your film.
It's very important to see Black men smile because all throughout the media, all we're being sold is Black trauma. So now it's just time to change that narrative and just show that Black boy joy. So you're gonna keep seeing us smile, for sure.
David, I love the confidence. Keep that same energy, as we say on social media. Lisa, Lisa, talk to us about that, right? Because you know, we here in the United States, sometimes we get on our high horse and on our arrogance and think that we're the only ones suffering with issues and dynamics, right? But I think what you're showing us today, that biases and wrong narratives are universal. It's a global dynamic. And I feel like that has been left out of the conversation. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we wanted to address with this film specifically. Being that it was an exchange between New York and London, we wanted to make sure that that was one of the main things that we got across in the film, is that we do have the same experience. It's just felt differently, or it looks different. It's in a different city, but it is that same experience, and we are all experiencing it together. And the way forward is to keep communicating with each other and allow ourselves to talk about it and figure out a way out of it together. That's the main goal, really.
David, how do you feel like creating short films and narratives like that can really have an impact on elected officials and policymakers as they begin to think about policies directed and dedicated for the impact of young men of color?
I feel like once people perspectives start changing and start seeing different things inside the world and different problems, then we can start focus on solutions. If we're only engaged into one problem, then the solution will be very narrow, and also the people that's inside the minority group, the marginalized community, they won't receive the solution they need. So I feel like making films that's showing these different things we're going through is definitely going to help these marginalized communities. For sure.
I love that. That was a great statement by you both. Now I want to bring in an individual by the name of Rashid Sabaz, because he is executive director of this fantastic organization called Director of the Critical Minded. Rashid, first, what's up, man? How you feeling today?
I'm great, Mike. How are you doing?
You look great in that all white, man. You're pure. You telling us that you're pure and high morals right now, Rashid?
I'm trying to stay on the straight and narrow.
I love that smile, Black man. Keep smiling. The reason why I wanted to bring you in, because when I was doing my research on you, there was something that struck out with me so cold in reading about Critical Minded. And it talks about the critic, right? And it says to analyze and interpret art and culture for the public, to ignite and inform discourse. Critical thinking is essential to democracy, and the critics of color who dissect dominant narratives and champion unheard stories make valuable contributions to social change. I feel that was demonstrated in Lisa's and David's piece just now. Talk to us about their piece and talk to us about that thesis of your organization and how that is in concert with that piece that we just saw.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Michael Smith and the whole MBK team for the invitation today. And congratulations to David and Lisa on the incredible film and the project. And to the point that you just made, Mike, I think, when we think about narratives are basically a collection of stories that we hear over time constantly. So you create a narrative, you have a narrative, as David was saying, that we don't know the narrative of Black men joy and Black men smiling because we don't see a lot of those stories. And if we see more of those stories consistently, then you start building a narrative of Black men in joy, of Black men being engaged. The role of cultural critical mind in a way of culture is that we see culture as the primary lever in which we help build both awareness about how we see ourselves and how we understand and bring meaning into the world. And that's what narratives do. That's how we transfer stories about who we are as a people, who we are as a community. And that's why narratives are so important and why the work that so many of the people who are gathered here today are doing, the young people who have been engaged with those individuals are doing, as well as policymakers. Policymakers make their policies based on the information and the practices that they see out in the world based on these narratives. And oftentimes in this particular moment on the eve and the anniversary of George Floyd, and we think about this past year of protests and the racial reckoning that's taking place, when I think about dominant narratives and I think about what David and Lisa has done, we haven't seen so much of what the bright spots, like groups like what Travian does with Be Me, the bright spots in this moment, the bright spots of the great work that organizers across the country, boys and men of color that are doing work in communities every day. We don't see those stories. And I think the work that David and Lisa are doing is a prime example of that. So that's really important.
That's so good. I'm going to come back to you, but I want to make sure I have enough time to get the rest of my panelists in, because what I want to do, panelists and the audience, just so you know, those who may not be familiar with my style of commentary and moderating, I only allow us for a certain amount of time to get in the soapbox and state our positions. At some point, I like to do calls of actions, do deep dives, and start holding people accountable and finding solutions. And so I have a couple of things I'm going to talk with you about, Rashid, in terms of like, how do we land the plane on some of this in plain English and plain speak so that people can actually make action of where we are right now, which means I am coming directly to the woman who makes it happen, Jana. Jana, Babatunde Bay, what is happening, my friend? You look great. I missed the memo with all white. What is happening?
Hey, Mike. Good to see you. And I'm going to take a page from Rashid's book and just say thanks to everyone here for showing up today and being a part of this, and for inviting me to be a part of it as well. The memo on white is really just about coming with pure intention. How about that? Which I think is an important piece actually to what we're talking about today. Narrative change is, to me, really about patterns. And we've been existing in a narrative that has had a pattern of negativity, and also has been kind of a narrow viewpoint in the past. For me, it's really about bringing together this intersectionality between social impact, change making, media, storytelling, and the diversity of our voices to bring stories forward that maybe haven't been told in the past, to use those stories to exemplify not only the diversity, but the universality of all of our common humanity. And specifically when you're talking about men of color, whether they be young, old, or anywhere in between, being able to tell that story in a very diverse and dynamic way, and quite frankly, an entertaining way. For you, David and Lisa, I couldn't help but bob my head a little bit because we were, rocking on your show. But to be able to do that in a way where people can receive the message and receive the medicine, so to speak, while also feeling deeply connected, and also, of course, when we're talking about entertainment, entertained. So to me, it's a bit of a trifecta between that media, the change making, and really being intentional about it from the beginning. So
it's actually, I might actually come back to you, Rashid, because I was going to talk about the chicken and the egg. What was the responsibility on? Like, is it responsibility of the policymaker to do a deep dive and define the narratives and to understand from a critical lens and critical aspect, on men of color, or is it the role of the critic? Is it the role of the creative? And that's where your lane is. You are the executive director of the Will and Jada Smith Foundation. Clearly we know who they are, but you are a producer in your own right as well. What is it the responsibility of the critic? Is it the responsibility of the creative to be able to change this narrative? Where does the responsibility lie?
You know what? I think it's actually everyone's responsibility. I think it has to be a shared responsibility. Certainly, if you are a creative, I think the onus lies on you to choose stories that have universally relatable emotions, that have characters that are complex and deep, and especially when we're talking about communities of color, that they're not one note, one-sided, or the same pattern of storytelling that we've seen in our historical past. Amend is one of the projects most recently that I produced. We were very intentional, back to intention, about creating a balanced story and also changing the pattern of truth, quote unquote. Going back to those truths we've maybe historically positioned as the unilateral end all and be all, but not so necessarily. And to kind of unearth those stories that allow us to be more rooted in the balance and the widening of that perspective. So it's in terms of the creative, I do think we have a responsibility to approach it from that way. But before you go, there's also the elements of the business in terms of those people who have the power to greenlight, those people like policymakers who have the power and the influence and the reach, the platform to actually make that change. There has to be an opening there as well.
And so Michael, I'm gonna come, Sorry, Jana.
No,
so Michael, I'm gonna come to you in a second to pick up where Jana left off, but Travian, shorter. What Jana is talking about is like these guardrails essentially, right? And how the intentionality is there with the project of Amend, right? Setting the guardrails, like the framing, no pun intended, asset framing from your organization, which you guys are a specialty in, right? Travian Short is the founder and CEO of Mbk Community. They do a lot of work when it deals with diversity and inclusion, but really asset framing. So Travian, talk to me about the asset framings of media and society, right? In terms of how the framing of that has either been wrong or right, or what we could do better in the work that you are constantly involved in on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And again, thank you to Michael Smith and the team at Obama Foundation. Great to see my brother Rashid. I always love being in your presence, man. And as far as asset framing in our work, a couple things that are important to remember. Number one is Mbk Community, we love Black people, and that's where we start. We're not confused about it. We don't half step on it. You see how I like to drop that right up front so there's no confusion about our orientation. But part of that comes from, honestly, when you think about framing is not about like spin or like trying to counter stuff. Like if you set out trying to respond to somebody else's narrative about you, you've already lost, right? You have to center yourself in your story. It's not about what people call you. It's about what do you answer to. Like literally, who do you think you are? Like that's the question you have to answer first. It's not about what other people think you are. Who do you think you are? And asset framing is literally not about what people say about you. Asset framing is what do you think about Black people, not what do you say about them. What do you think about them? How do you introduce and define Black people in your own mind? And so we direct our efforts mostly at Black leaders. We train foundations and media houses and a bunch of folks, but they're the second audience. The first audience is us, because right now, Black leaders, so if you think about culture is all about how people survive. Right now, we are survived by defining our own people by their biggest problem, worst threat, worst potential, greatest need, greatest challenge. Like we start the conversation about ourselves by denigrating us, right? And we think it's necessary to attract resources, right? It's how we get fed on our social cause missions. But the fact of the matter is, even when we win our victories, right now we win our victories by writing our story in the public consciousness as a story of a bunch of broken, backwards, deficient, failing people. Like that's the way the conscious learns to, that's the way the public learns to relate to us. That's our hustle. That's how we feed our causes these days. Well, that strategy means you lose even when you win, right? Because when you win, we are still defined as problems. We are not defined by the aspiring, contributing people that we have always been. We're the only folks in America who arrived here on the shores as assets on the books. Like we have literally been assets to this nation from Jump Street. Nothing was built without our involvement. Nothing was created, no wealth was created without it being based in us. And so when we talk about concepts like freedom and liberty and justice, Black folks have fought for those things longer than the founding fathers ever did, right? We continue to restore, we literally have helped America live to its highest aspirations since the minute we got here. And we still do it now. So to introduce us by our brokenness is like introducing Muhammad Ali by saying he got knocked down a bunch of times. I mean, it's true, but it's not the accurate story.
Well, Trayvon, I don't want to lose what all you just said and come back to it. I want to stay with you for a little bit longer before I go to Michael, because I want you just succinctly talk to us about how does that work in practice, right? Because there are people that are here that has ability to have impact immediately, short-term and long-term. So break it down in terms of a solution.
Here's how it works in real life. So Be Me Community is a network of inspired Black leaders, all different walks of life, government, for-profit, nonprofit, et cetera. And the thing that all the brothers and sisters have in common is they've committed themselves to advancing our people, right? So literally helping us to live, own, vote, and excel. Those are the things that our folk work on. In addition to the network and getting Black folks to collaborate around a better narrative about us as they do this important work, we also train the heads of foundations, social impact shops, the NBA, like a lot of different groups. We've trained them in asset framing. And asset framing is the skill of defining people by their aspirations and contributions before getting into the various challenges. Because what we're trying to do is create a movement where we're building equity without stigma. Because when you stigmatize people, like just from literally from a psychological perspective, anything stigmatized, your brain associates with threat, like automatically. Spiders, rats, roaches, if once it carries a stigma, your brain is fear prompted. And so we have to stop pursuing our goals by making ourselves the rats and roaches of society to be like, that's the wrong foot to start the conversation on.
So that's what you're saying. So it's also starting within to undo the psychological things that have already been embedded in us over a systemic period of time. Michael, I gotta get to Michael. Michael, what is happening, my friend? How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
You got the white memo. I see. Me and Trayvon didn't get it. All good.
Trying to fit in and be like Rashid.
That's awesome. Michael, you're the executive director of Lead with Love. And really what Trayvon is talking about is putting that love within us, loving on ourselves, changing the narrative within to begin to love on ourselves, because often too, it's always interesting. I always think about this shirt, this t-shirt. And I know a lot of times people don't understand how fashion can be a form of activism. I remember looking at this shirt and it said, it's ghetto until it's not. Right? It's ghetto until it's in vogue, right? And then all of a sudden it's no longer ghetto. And I think what I'm pulling out, I don't mean to put words in Trayvon's mouth, but how I interpreted that was that oftentimes we don't see the value of us. We don't see the value and the goodness of us because of all this negative connotation surrounding within media around how the things that we do is ghetto until media decides that it's not ghetto. And the work that you do, you work a lot with studios, film studios. You work a lot with corporations and creating narratives, and you work a lot with actors and helping framing their mindset. How then are you in relationship to what we're talking about of this narrative of asset framing, of this narrative of guardrails to ensure that these entities don't continuously promote and populate this type of negativity, reinforcement of negativity?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about how, this narrative work influences how other people view, Black and Brown communities. But I think it's also important, kind of what you just touched on, which is it also impacts how we view ourselves, our relationship to the world, our positioning within, different communities. And so, the way folks are portrayed on the screen has a huge impact on how they view themselves. And, for example, with the work with Common, we do a lot of work inside prisons. And one of the guys inside made a really good point. He's like, if we're constantly portrayed as monsters on the outside, how do we not view ourselves as monsters ourselves? And so that really struck me. And that was like 5 years ago, but still remember that moment. And so, I think the push for inclusive storytelling and diversity is not just a trend. I think it's the only way forward for Hollywood. And I think that, for so long, cinema has been used as a tool against, communities of color. And we're finally seeing a change in that with so many great creatives like Ava DuVernay, Lena Waithe, and so many great other folks. And so to see those kind of tools used as weapons to, build self-esteem, build courage, build self-love, I think is really important. And there's nothing more powerful than stories in terms of accomplishing that.
I love it. Some themes I'm pulling out already from the conversation is love, loving on self, loving through, and also to this narrative of the chicken or the egg. Like, what's responsibility, right? Is it the role of the artist, the art, the critic? The role of the policymaker, the elected? Lisa and David, I cannot believe I did a full round and we still have time left. You guys are dope. Thank you. You guys are great media professionals with the sound bites. Lisa and David, I'm coming to you next because I think all of what we're talking, really, we have your age group in mind, right? In terms of the impressionable, right? The young, the youth, the coming up, but also too, the youth who are making change, the youth who are leaders, right? And so I love to connect with you because I think I'm you guys' age. I know that I'm not, because I like to pretend that I am and feel that I guess I'm Gen Z. Is that what we're rocking right now, Gen Z? Shout out to all my Gen Z folk. But Lisa, how do you digest media, right? Like, do you feel it has an impact on the narrative shaping of you and your friends and your colleagues and your cohorts? And I want to talk about media, not just film, because I think we're kind of leaning and talking a lot about film, but that's also journalists, that's also writing, that's also newspaper, that's also to digital. Like, there's so much more. It's also to elected officials on the campaign stuff. It's in presidential debates. The only time you talk about Black men is when we talk about prison and prison reform, but we don't talk about Black men in terms of anything else, about health and all these other things. Talk to us, Lisa, about how you digest and how it makes you feel when you digest these type of narratives.
I think for Gen Z and this generation, a lot of our media is coming from social media, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing. On social media, depending on who you're following and what you choose to look at, that will depend on what you receive. And I think I can speak for myself. I choose to look at positivity. I choose to look at things that are going to better me. But I know that there's a lot of people that are stuck in a social media space where there is a lot of negativity and there is a lot of stereotypes and things that just aren't true, to be honest. But I think for us, it's definitely really important to take control of that and take control of what you do digest and what you see, because we do have that level of control with social media. It gets more difficult when it's about like the news outlets and magazines because they control what they put in there. But I think for social media, that's the main place that we can really control those messages and make sure that we're receiving the ones that we want to receive, and then also putting out the messages that we want to receive as well, so that others can do that.
I love that, Lisa. So well said. David, I want to come to you for a second because I want to know, you have the floor. You are a young man of color. You are essentially the essence of what MBK was founded for. I want to know, as you have all these people watching you, no pressure, and listening to you, what do you want this community, those of us who are watching and listening to you and learning from you and Lisa, to know about your Black friends, your young men of colors who are your friends? And what I mean by that is, and speaking of film, that film One Night in Miami, that just got released recently, was such a beautiful portrayal for me of me and my Black friends. I actually cried watching that. Ironically, I was heading to meet up with my same three Black male friends after watching that movie. And I cried because it showed to me the vulnerability of what me and my friends do when we're together, right? We cry, we emote, we talk, amongst each other, we jest. I don't remember where I was at for a second. We jest. We're aggressive, but we're soft and the whole night. Talk to us, David, about, what do you want people to know about you and your friends as we begin to think about narratives of young men of color?
Thank you. So, me, my friends and I, my entire community, even Yonkers MBK, what we stand on just being ourselves. Because if we keep focusing on how the media portrays Black men in a negative way they portray us, then it's like we're just gonna keep stagnating ourselves. But if we continue to be ourselves, they're gonna start seeing, oh, Black people aren't monolithic. Black people have different perspectives. Black people have different voices. So just being ourselves and just being different. Oh, to be different is be yourself. So that's what
David, that was brilliant. That is, to be different is to be yourself. Rashid, critical-minded, with the remaining time that we have, what do you want electeds to do? What is a takeaway that you want them to have today? What is a takeaway you want those who are creating policies of young men of color? What is it that you want them to take away with today?
I think, hopefully they'll take away everything that has been shared here. I think Jana, my colleague at Color Change, my former colleague and good close friend, President Rashad Robinson at Color Change, often talks about narrative power versus narrative change. And the idea around power is that we need to build power. If culture is not moving us towards building power for people to improve their lives, improve our conditions in our communities, improve the things that we want to see done, then narrative is not worth it. Narrative change is not worth it. And the narrative power is an ability for us to build power for our communities and for ourselves. So what David was saying about centering himself, what Travian talked about in terms of how do we think about Black men when we first engaged them, the idea about the asset framing, and what Jana said about power. I think all those things collectively, all the voices that we just heard from and what Michael Latch shared in terms of the idea of building and holding accountable Hollywood and the work that's happening there and ensuring that there's diversity and inclusion of voices, all those things collectively happening and building power is at the root of all of that. And so for me, at Critical Minded, and we're doing the work, and I'm a new executive director there, but the idea is that my colleagues talk about culture as a battleground where we see some narratives win and some others lose. And so for elected officials, what they can take from today is that they should assess themselves, as Travian said, about what are the narratives that they've ingested. What are the ideas that they have around Black men and boys, or boys and men of color, and Black girls and young women as well? And how have they ingested those narratives, and how do those narratives inform the policies and practices they're putting out? If we look at those policies and practices as they currently are, we know that they're not effectively doing what's needed to ensure the future for our young people. And that's for David and Lisa and everyone else who's in the audience in the room. So that's my hope for the policymakers.
Well, I am so glad that this is being recorded because that needs to be played back. All that what you just said, brother. I thought every word of that. Thank you for that. And now we are about to go. It's not over, folks. We are now about to go into Q&A. So now you guys can get involved in this conversation. We want to talk with you, not at you. Feel free to keep submitting your questions that we have coming up. And I already have a question already. You guys are engaged. Panelists, you got our audience fired up over here. So question number one comes from an anonymous viewer today. For Lisa and David, how did you come up with the concept for the film? And what did you learn while working on the project? So for time's sake, Lisa, why don't you take up how did you guys come up with the concept of the film? And David, why don't you take up what did you learn while working on the project?
So the concept came from responding to the Black Lives Matter protests that happened last year, literally around this time when George Floyd was murdered. And we were asked to respond to it. And one of the first things that kind of came up was microaggressions and the fact that they're not really spoken about. And they're actually one of the main experiences that we've all had, all of the people that were involved in making the film Nasser, the Nia Society, that we've all had before, and that they need to be highlighted, and we need to show people that what that looks like and how it feels. So a lot of it has come from our own experiences. Every single experience that you saw in that film has come from us. And they're real experiences that we've had and that we still have to this day. And we want to highlight what that feels like and how we can show people what it really looks like.
Amazing. David, what did you learn while working on this project? The viewer wants to know.
Biggest takeaway was that I was trying to find a solution to microaggressions while I was acting on set. But then I realized there's not really a solution yet, because all those experiences inside the film, our real life experience, those same experiences inside of the same scenes. Our real life was like living it that same day too. After we shot that, I went to the store. Someone was following me. Once I was trying to sit on the bus, so another white male just moved aside. So it was like, wow, like it's not just a movie, it's real life. So it just, I'm guessing the biggest takeaway I took from it was just to continue to speak on it and just educate people on it.
That's amazing, David. And that's the thing. We're always constantly learning, right? And we always are constantly teaching. But with that being said, Jana, I want to come to you actually with that. You know, a lot of it has been the chicken or the egg kind of conversation. You know, social media, to what Lisa said, the Gen Z learns a lot from social media. That's their source of information. There's some narratives out there that, you know, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, you know, I don't want to teach, right? I'm kind of getting to what David was talking about. What is the role? Like, what do we ever stop teaching? Should we stop teaching? At what point, when is the onus on others to do the work? Or is it always incumbent on us to always educate and to amplify?
Well, I'll answer from the first perspective for me, which is the spiritual perspective. Because I think as human beings, we have the onus of being responsible for ourselves philosophically, spiritually. If we don't show up for ourselves first, I mean, to the point of that journey from fear to love, if we can't love ourselves and stand in our own truth, then what we bring to the table cannot possibly represent authenticity or truth, or be a part of the conversation of breaking some of the patterns that, you know, just have been challenging for us, whether it's our subconscious, our psyche, or, you know, the things that we're seeing out in our culture and society. So I think it begins with the self. Additionally, as we show up in the world, whether it's as a creative, as a policymaker, as a young person trying to find their way, we have to be conscious and intentional about what we're saying, how we're saying it, and our own ability to wield that power in whatever we're doing. You know, for me, coming at it from both the philanthropy and the creative perspective, there's a huge array of things that can be done. And for me, it's a daily choice to do those things. You know, to be a part of a larger group that also consciously makes those decisions, whether it be in the stories that we tell, the characters that we gravitate to, the business deals that we do, or the people that we select and choose to be a part of our larger ecosystem, personal lives, professional lives, et cetera. And I say that specifically to the young people here, who we choose to be around. It is all about being able to show up every day and to use your power and influence to be a part of that positive interaction. So I mean, I know you asked me that twice now. Does it lie over here or lie over there? And I still contend it is both. It's a yes and. It's a both conversation.
I think it's always going to be a yes and. You know what I mean? Not always, but I think we have to be comfortable. For now, right? I think we have to be comfortable in that. And I think the reason why I keep pressing you, Janice, I know you have the ability to tackle that nuance and to be honest, you know, with it. Because sometimes on Twitter and social media, 140 characters just isn't enough to speak to nuance, which goes to question number 2. Audience, you guys are rocking with these questions, man. And let me tell you, Lisa and David, y'all are stars. There is a lot of references here for y'all. They don't want to talk to they don't want to talk to those who are not in Gen Z like us, right? They just want to keep talking to us Gen Zers, and I'm rocking with that. But this one is actually for you, Jermaine. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's coming from Jermaine. What up, Jermaine? How can we continue empowering young men of color and encouraging them to change the narratives for themselves? I want Travian to answer that, if you don't mind, my brother. Again, to repeat, Travian, how can we continue empowering young men of color and encouraging them to change the narratives for themselves? That speaks to what you were educating us on earlier.
But funny enough, I go back to David, because when you posed him the question about how does he keep his head on straight about it, he was like, well, I don't tune into that stuff. We tell our own story, we live our own. So I do think it's really important that we do that we echo a fuller truth about ourselves. 5 years ago, wrote a book called Reach, 40 Black Men Speak on Living, Leading, and Succeeding. The book became a New York Times bestseller, and it is literally just a bunch of 7-page autobiographies of brothers from all different corners. So it's just really important that we tell each other the truth. Like other people are going to say what they want to say, but you have to amplify and echo the truth of your story to yourself so that others can feel it too.
And Trayvon, I think you guys have said some very truthful things today, especially you earlier. I love what you were just saying about how we have to examine within, right? I think that is such a hard narrative, because when we have moments like this and conversations like this, you know, when we have panels and summits, it's often pointing outside, right? Is what you did wrong? What are you not doing? But sometimes we have to be able to look within, and that can be challenging. Michael, my brother in name, this question is for you, my friend. I think you can take this one. It's coming from Robert Lewis. What's up, Robert? Thank you for joining us today, my friend. How can we systematically share the global experience of Black people and people of color in short films, such as the one we just viewed for public consumption? And audience and Robert, the reason why I toss it to Michael on this one is because Michael engages with film studios, you know, across the board, as well as he engages with cultural entities and individuals who actually do this work. So again, Michael, the question, how can we systematically share the global experience of Black people and people of color in short films, such as the one we just viewed for public consumption?
Yeah, so I think there are like multiple obstacles and layers to that. I think one that comes to mind is what I've noticed with studios is just the lack of proximity to, you know, different communities that don't look like them. And that lack of proximity doesn't, you know, build empathy or give insight into what they're experiencing. And so they don't necessarily have an understanding or curiosity into what those communities are experiencing. So trying to bring together, you know, community leaders with executives and content creators to kind of build those bridges and relationships so they can kind of see the value and importance in telling those stories. I think it's also important to, you know, work with, you know, leaders on the ground, whether it's Campaign for Black Male Achievement, My Brother's Keeper, who have, you know, their ear on the ground to what communities are experiencing and where they see the gaps are, and kind of connecting them directly with the studios, so they can kind of speak for themselves rather than me being like a middleman and trying to translate or interpret what they're saying. And then you also have like the Ava DuVernay path, where for her, she says like, it's not about knocking on closed doors, it's about building our own house and having our own door. And so she's creating avenues for distribution globally through her own channels. And, you know, she has a partnership with Netflix where they release the films that she, you know, acquires on a global scale to 190 countries. And so that relationship she's built with Netflix executive has been able to do exactly what, you know, that question is hoping to make happen. And so I think, you know, what Rashid said about power is also important, is building, you know, their own power and storytelling so they don't have to rely so much on the, you know, old traditional institutions that have kept them out for so long, I think is important. But yeah, also again, building those organic relationships. So it's not just in times of crisis or when there's an issue or when, you know, an exec is trying to sell this community something, but having a consistent 360 holistic approach where you're talking to these communities year round. And again, not just when, you know, there's the global uprising or when there's, you know, a rise in hate crimes and things like that. It's about, you know, finding moments of just not the pain, but also the joy where they can connect.
I love that. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that one. So David, I mean, you and Lisa are the stars. The next question is coming from, and I apologize if I don't do your name justice, Dr. Quezada. Dr. Quezada wants to know, David, how did Mbk Yonkers assist you in becoming, y'all ready for this? The fantastic young man you've become. Come on, keep smiling, David. Look at that smile.
Hey,
look at that
man. Yonkers Mbk assisted me in becoming the king I am by just always being there for not only me, but all my brothers and all the sisters as well. Because it's, you know, it's my brother's keeper. We also, as a man, we have to take care of our family. We have to provide for our family. So they taught us how to be a man and how to take care of women and how to speak as well. So they just taught us how to be young men, how to be young kings, and also gave us opportunities. We see that's another big thing. Often we focus on social causes, but we need to start focusing on policy changing and just giving people the opportunities and resources. Because people ask, why do like people in the hood act out the way they do? But it's really because the lack of resources and opportunities. So yeah, Yonkers MBK really helped us because they gave us the opportunities, the resources, and we just had fun.
I love it. David, can you please invite me to a meeting, my brother? I mean, whatever y'all are serving there, that smile is so good. I need that energy. Lisa, I'm going to come to you right now for a second, but audience, keep coming in with your questions. It's coming. David, King, he said his sisters, his queens. I want to come to you because I'm curious as cultural exchange. You living in the UK, you having as a cultural exchange with MBK members from Yonkers. Do you notice that young men of color are the same in the UK as they are in the United States? Do you see the similarities? Talk to me a little bit about maybe some things your discoveries that you learned.
I can say for sure that there is a lot of similarities, and it's mainly it's just the energy that they have. They are all of the young Black men that I know they have such a pure, loving energy of just wanting to have fun and wanting to smile and joke around. Like every single person that I know that's under 25 that is a young Black male, they have that energy, and through the exchange, like we got to know David and also DeAndre and the other members of Nia Society, and you can feel that energy through the screen. Like as you can see now with David, you can really feel it. So I definitely say that energy that they have, and also the passion to be successful. There's a lot of drive to be successful, and you can tell that these guys are passionate about being successful and having that success.
I love that. Travian, how do we keep that framing going to what Lisa is talking about and what David is exuding in this energy, right? Like, how do we as community leaders, those who are engaged in our community, who are engaged in policy, how do we keep that going?
Yeah, I talk about the skill of asset framing. It is a skill. It's an equity skill. And it's a very simple one, but if we have it, it flips a lot of what we're trying to do, makes it easier. And the skill is really simple. Framing is always about how do you introduce something. It's not all the data. It's the data that leads. What's leading the story? What's defining the story? So when we develop the habit of insisting on pursuing equity without stigmatizing our kids, without stigmatizing our people, that's the goal. Like literally insist on equity without stigma, which means we're always going to introduce our folks by their aspirations first, by their contributions first, right? An accurate word, like I'll give this example. An accurate label for most at-risk youth, like when you talk about at-risk youth, like that's a big thing. Most of the time, a word that you can use that is accurate is the word student. Like most of them go to school. So let's talk about students who are aspiring to graduate, grow up, fulfill their dreams for themselves, but they have to do so in environments that have been disinvested in, environments that have been over-policed, environments that are being under-resourced. So let's talk about their aspirations first, and then the context that make them at risk, which the label at-risk youth never even tells. We tell the story as if we tell the story as if the kid is the problem. But the kid ain't the problem. The kid's trying to grow up and live out their aspirations for themselves, but we never speak life to their aspirations. We introduce them as a problem. So introduce them truthfully by what they aspire to do, what they are making contributions to society, and then talk about the stuff that's getting in their way. That's how we can pursue equity without stigma.
What are some options? I want to stick with you for a second, Travian, because I love that. It's all about that is changing a narrative, right? And like word choice, right? And introduction. What has been some of the biggest obstacles as you guys have done this work for people who maybe have resisted this new way of thinking? Like, what has been some of the obstacles and challenges, and how should leaders be rethinking through these obstacles right now?
Yeah, first of all, we train foundations and social impact shops and the like. The biggest, oddly enough, and we also train government and corporate people, but the biggest resistance actually is in government and in nonprofit land. It's the charities and the government that insist upon using language that stigmatizes our populations to spur engagement. That's just the model. That's how the model works. Philanthropy spends $76 billion a year to first get you to negatively label somebody and then try to do something about it. That's 27 times the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe budget. You know, they spend that every single year on a narrative that says, let's define these kids, you know, in the worst light, and then see what we can do about them. So I think that's where we have to start.
I wasn't ready for you to say in the charitable side. But that's for a whole different conversation, for a whole different summit, right? That goes to the microeconomies that exist in keeping the problem going sometimes versus really working for the solution, because you essentially solve yourself out of it, economics. But that's for a whole different conversation that Michael Smith did not sign me up to talk about. So Michael Smith, I'm going to stay on message. And so Rashid, Jen, I see you laughing. You already know. You already know. I was like, get nobody in trouble here.
Dying to jump in, but we'll help keep you on topic by not doing so.
No, let me do 20 seconds on the solution.
I want to go.
Yeah. I want to do 20 seconds on. Let me do 20 seconds on solutions. I identified the problem, right? The thing about how there's a business around stigmatizing us, basically, like there's billions of dollars spent. The thing about if you're defining our young people by their aspirations and contributions as students who are aspiring to grow up and graduate and all that kind of stuff, well, if you do it that way, then you actually have a longer, like the economic path makes sense. When you're full.
Oh no, he's froze. No, Travian, you were killing it. Oh, and we lost him. Jana, we lost him. Okay,
tragedy.
Well, Jana,
the tragedy.
Okay,
because he was bringing it. He's bringing it.
He's back. He's back. Okay, Travian, give us like 10 seconds. I got to wrap.
I guess I should stop talking. whatever I said got my internet plug pulled. So,
I think that was Michael Smith. I think Michael Smith was like, no. Travian, that was great. Jenna, you know what? I'm doing clock management here. Everyone, Team Mbk, I see the clock. But I do recognize that people who are actually on this call are in the philanthropic world. Jana also, you know, is a producer, but is also in the philanthropic world too, as well, with the foundation. Talk to us if you can, Jana, in a short amount of time. I know it's gonna be hard. Your reaction to what Travian just mentioned.
No, he's speaking the truth. It is true. And also, it's a yes and also, being in the position to do something about that and taking on that accountability and responsibility to wield that power again in a positive way. You know, we look at it, everybody knows who Will and Jada Smith is, probably on this call. The foundation does its social impact work very intentionally around the focus areas, education, social empowerment, sustainability, that lives inside of that philanthropy ecosystem. And also, we look at it from the perspective of all of the business enterprises, the pieces of content, the stories that we choose to tell, and how we put those things together, the above the line, below the line, Lisa and David, to how you construct the production, the way we interact with the executives, both from the studio level, you know, to the earlier point, Michael, about dealing with these mega platforms, a Netflix, a Sony, you know, Warner Brothers, et cetera, and using our power and influence to intentionally choose to be inclusive, to intentionally choose to be positive, to intentionally choose to move away from a narrative of fear, a narrative of exclusion, a narrative of blame, and instead focus on love, focus on joy, focus on the power of our universally relatable emotions as human beings. That is a powerful tool, and every single person has it, particularly when you're talking about social media, which is, you know, an area, you know, we don't need to talk about Will Smith or even Jada Pinkett Smith or the Smith universe on social media. I won't go down that road, but for all the young people who are on their phones and using that social media every single day and, you know, digesting that social media, we have the power to choose how we show up in the world. And we can do so, you know, kind of apathetically or unintentionally and kind of haphazardly, or we can choose to do it to the point about that positive narrative and thinking about through the framework of asset. We can choose to do it in a way that gives us the ability to be who we want to be, to say the things we want to say, and to create pathways for those who come behind us. So I'll stop there. Otherwise,
yes, that was you for the philanthropic world. Yes. That was for you. So this next question I have, I don't like asking the same question to different panelists, but I'm going to make an exception to my rule because I'm going to come from it from two different vantage points. So Rashid, I want you to take one view, and then Lisa and David, I want you to take the other view. So his question, Rashid says, how can elders continue to share their experience to support and empower the next generation? So I want you to talk about that from like the elder, from a critic perspective. But then with David and Lisa, I want you to know, how do you want to engage with elders? How would you like elders to engage with you to share their experience? So Rashid, you go first.
Since I'm not Gen Z and I'm now titled elder, which I own, which I appreciate. I would say
it was the all white Rashid. It was really the all white celebrity. I was like, he's such a
no. I'm serious. I appreciate the title and I appreciate the opportunity. But the thing I would say is, Travian said, I think first of all, Travian has a book that he mentioned that I'm proud to be a part of as well. We tell our stories, and I think, being in community, I think the main thing that I think, Michael Latt does this well, all of us who do this work does it well, which is, we engage with the communities and we're a part of the communities that we want to engage. And I think when we're present and we're engaged, and this is what Be Me is all about, this is what Mbk Yonkers with David's all about. When we're in community and we're present and we're able to tell our stories, that's how, as elders, we transfer information. But it's not us just telling our stories, it's also listening and also being engaged to hear their stories. Because then what we're able to do is make the connection between what their experiences are and our experiences and how we bridge. It's not a condemnation. It's not like us coming in saying we know the answers. The reality is that as things evolve, as evolutionary things happen with technology, we're learning from each other. And so I would say, as an elder, it's our responsibility to reach out. It's our responsibility to continue to be engaged in conversation with young people and being present for them as mentors. Now, we didn't get into mentorship, but building power and transference of information is about mentorship.
So with that being said, remaining time, I want to let Lisa and David have the last, since you guys started us off so brilliantly. This has been about you. You guys started so greatly. How do you want elders, how would you like to engage with elders to hear the stories?
I would say, I think I agree with Rashid, what he said exactly. Like, I think being engaged is so important, but also a lot of honesty, like honesty about that moment, about things that were happening around you in those moments, and just a lot of honesty and openness. I think in the Black community, sometimes we push things under the rug and we act like it doesn't matter, or it doesn't hurt as much as it really does. And I think that we need to be more honest with each other, not just as elders and youngsters, but in general.
I love that. David, bring it home for us Gen Z people in like 30 seconds.
I feel like the best way that elders can teach us is just teaching us history. Once we know our history, we know our future. As we continue to educate ourselves on our Black history and our kingship, then we can move forward on finding solutions and know that this was the root. All right, so how are we gonna uproot it? So just teaching us our history and work towards a solution.
I love how you both went to honesty and transparency. That was a perfect way to end this panel, because that is what our panelists has brought, is honesty and transparency and tough and strong medicine. You two have a future in the creatives and being a critic. You guys have mastered the power of the soundbite. You guys gave me incredible 30-second sound bites. The story arc was there. You guys had a beginning, middle, end in your thesis, and you saw it in every statement. I am proud of you guys. I am excited for you two. You guys are the reason why all of us on this panel do the work. I kind of be an elder from time to time, but I'm not operating as a Gen Z at this time period. MBK, Team MBK, all those on the call, I want you to give a virtual round of applause for my fantastic panelists, Jana, Lisa, David, Rashid, Travian, and Michael. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for bringing your truth. Thank you for all the work that you guys do in community and community building, and it helps change the narrative. And thank you for bringing so much ideas and things for us to consider for us to change the narrative. Team MBK, MBK Foundation, thank you guys for setting the stage for this to happen. And thank you for your tireless efforts to ensure that the narrative can be changed and will be changed, and that we are all here as a community to hold everyone accountable to ensure that. It's been a pleasure hosting you guys. My name is Mike Muse, and I will see you soon out in the streets, Gen Z.
That was an incredible session, right? I want to give Mike, and please join me in giving Mike and Michael, Jana, David, Lisa, Rashid, Travian. Let's give them all a big virtual round of applause. I know they can feel that energy, they can feel that love. So let's have them feel it. I'm Mike Strautmanis. I'm the Executive Vice President for Civic Engagement at the Obama Foundation. That is a super fancy title. But what it means is that I have the privilege of helping make sure that this work, the work of the MBK Alliance, has what it needs to carry out its critical mission. I've worked for President Obama for almost 15 years now, with a small break in between where I had a few years working at the Walt Disney Company. You know, there at Disney, I got to see firsthand the power of storytelling and narrative change, and how calling people to dream big dreams, to seek and to see the best is more powerful than despair. You know, my folks' neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, where we're creating the Obama Presidential Center, every day I see young men inspiring new leaders, starting innovative enterprises, looking out for their neighbors, and working to bring meaningful and lasting solutions to the challenges of our time. So when we're engaged in the work of creating opportunity, I think we spend too much time focusing on the problem, on the fears, on what's not working. And when that happens, we lose sight of the opportunities, the hope, the joy, the love, what is working. And those messages seep inside the mindset of our neighbors, our families, and even the young people we're trying to serve. So look, President Obama has said more than a few times, there should be joy in this work. There should be joy when we see communities coming together to disrupt broken systems. There should be joy when we see our sons and brothers and daughters and sisters simply enjoying life and starting on the journey to become their ancestors' wildest dreams. I love that shirt. I love that phrase. That's the power of narrative. That's how we flip the script. That's how we begin with joy. That's how we lead with the unbridled potential and possibility that is distributed equally to all of our children, even though opportunity is not. The other thing that brings me tremendous joy is working alongside a team of such passionate, driven, brilliant, and devoted colleagues. And please I want to ask all of you today to join me in thanking the extraordinary MBK Alliance and Obama Foundation teams who have worked tirelessly to create this experience for all of you. I've seen it firsthand. They have sweated over this. They have stayed up all night over this. It's so important to them to create this experience alongside you to meet the moment and fulfill your mission. I also want to say thank you to our partners, Weymouth Watson, Praxis, Strategic Community Partners. Thank you for joining us to make this a reality. So look, do me a favor, drop a note in the chat. That's like the phrase of 2021, right? Drop a note in the chat, please. But, you know, send an email, post a snap. I mean, you might even like get a stamp, send somebody an email the old-fashioned way, a letter the old-fashioned way, wave a scarf, do something, send some love to this dynamic group of change makers that I am proud to call colleagues. And I'll just give them a thank you from me one more time. And also, let's give some love to Senegal and Alejandro for keeping us just motivated and energized and excited as we break barriers and build dreams together. Senegal, back to you, man.
Thank you so much for that, Michael. I'm feeling fired up. Make some noise back home. Don't just drop in the chat, make some noise. What a powerful first session. Changing the narrative and changing the systems that create the narrative is exactly what's at the root of everything MBK does. And this fundamental belief in narrative change is highlighted in the new Mbk Equity Framework, a blueprint for communities looking to improve social conditions for boys and young men of color. Let's take a moment to learn a little bit more about this new Mbk Equity Framework, what it is, how it was developed, and how it's going to help you transform systems and create lasting change in your own communities.
Hello, I'm Michael Smith, Executive Director of My Brother's Keeper Alliance and Director of Youth Opportunity Programs with the Obama Foundation. Since our founding in 2014, the My Brother's Keeper team has traveled coast to coast to meet young leaders, local elected officials, tribal leaders, business executives, nonprofit practitioners, and everyday citizens, all of whom are creating new, exciting pathways for boys and young men of color. The leaders we've met at the local level, leaders like you, are working tirelessly to address the barriers facing boys and young men of color in their communities. And you've told us that we can help accelerate your efforts to build lasting change. That's why we're launching the Mbk Alliance Equity Framework and certification to provide greater support to the network of MBK communities and to set clear and measurable standards for building safe and supportive communities for boys and young men of color. Communities where boys and young men of color feel valued and have clear pathways to opportunity. The Mbk Framework will help you uncover the disparate outcomes for boys and young men of color in your community, review the policies and practices that have held the disparities in place, and gather the right players to change it.
Through our work, we've heard from community leaders across the country about the importance of having a shared vision and set of standards around what it means to be an MBK community. Many community leaders asked us, how do I know if the work I'm leading with boys and young men of color is actually transforming systems? And how do we sustain the work to see actual outcomes? Questions like those led us to develop the Mbk Equity Framework, a common set of supports, resources, and expectations for MBK communities, along with ways they can connect with other efforts across the country. The Mbk Equity Framework is a resource designed for any community looking to improve the lives of boys and young men of color and underserved youth. The framework has been rigorously developed from the ground up in partnership with government, policy, development, equity, and organizational leadership from local and national organizations on the front lines of youth and community development. The framework is designed so that existing MBK communities, new and emerging MBK communities, philanthropic organizations, and practitioners can address the conditions our boys and young men of color face and reach a new standard of success. The Mbk Equity Framework is comprised of 4 components: a set of governing core values and elements of success, a series of self-assessments that can help you measure your community's progress and improving the lives of boys and young men of color, a roadmap and toolbox which provide resources and next steps based on your assessment, and a story map which provides case studies and profiles of successful communities. The Mbk Equity Framework identifies 8 elements of success to help indicate what strategies are working and where further improvement is needed. At the forefront of this assessment is the importance of clear and accurate data, a shared consensus among stakeholders, and an agreement on the importance of MBK's justice-based work. The 8 elements of success include collaboration, if you want to go far, go together, equity, none of us are free until all of us are free, vision, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else, systems change, root out, reform, reimagine, evidence, invest in what works, focus on results, data-driven decisions, what gets measured gets managed, sustainability, invest in lasting solutions, infrastructure, and results, stakeholder engagement, communicate early, often, and in all directions.
RISE is honored to represent MBK in Richmond, California. We can speak to element 2 of the Mbk Equity Framework. None of us are free until all of us are free. Every day, young people are experiencing gender identity, race, and class as intersectional and non-binary. So RISE asserts that wellness for boys and young men of color necessitates wellness for girls and young women of color and gender non-conforming young people of color. Gender justice, queer justice, and racial justice are core to RISE's peer identity groups, youth leadership institutes, art and culture, education and health programming. We stay approximate to young people most harmed by systems. RISE staff reflect and come from our community, people of color, LGBTQ+ community, and many are formerly RISE members. We center relationships, healing, and justice for systems change.
Here at MBK in Los Angeles County, we've truly embraced the Mbk Equity Framework, especially element 5, that's focused on systems change. Right, we really want to root out, reform, and reimagine our justice systems, as well as all of our county systems, and in particular our approach to youth diversion. So for example, we facilitated deliberate collaborations between government agencies, a lot of local community-based organizations and nonprofits, as well as, resident leaders, people with lived experience, so that we can develop and launch the county's youth diversion plan. We now offer community-based alternatives to incarceration for over 80% of our youth offenses. And this has dramatically reduced the number of boys and young men of color that have come into contact with LA County's carceral systems, while we focus on directly dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline and changing our entire justice system as we know it.
Hi, I'm Mayor Ron Nirenberg from San Antonio, Texas, and I'm a proud My Brother's Keeper San Antonio Leadership Table member. The Mbk Equity Framework is an excellent tool that we've utilized to strengthen our governance from the ground up to make investments in lasting solutions, infrastructure, and results, ensuring sustainability. My Brother's Keeper San Antonio's network structure is made up of 3 levels of system leadership, 3 work groups, the anchor team, and the leadership table. The 3 work groups focus on restorative justice, post-secondary success, and justice-involved young people. Each work group has community engagement and system change objectives that ground the work they do collectively. Those groups have a chair, which forms the anchor team, which advocates on behalf of the work group to the leadership table. The leadership table has the authority to allocate resources and shape policy as a joint network and at their institutions. This structure and commitment allow for boys and young men of color to have a clearer pathway to obtaining a post-secondary degree.
As we embark on this journey together, we encourage you to engage with us. If you have any questions about the Equity Framework or certification process, please head to our website to learn more. Thank you for your dedication to our boys and young men of color and your continued support of the My Brother's Keeper mission. This framework and certification process is an important next step in connecting and strengthening the work of organizations like yours and so many others across the nation. We look forward to working with you soon.
Hey, what's up everybody? This is Matt DiMatteo from New Life Centers in Chicago. I wanted to talk for a minute about how we're breaking barriers and building dreams here in Little Village. First and foremost, we're focused on the juvenile justice system, and we're working to transform and actually shut down some of the state facilities and build community-based solutions. And then on the street outreach level, we're working to heal our streets. As you know, Chicago's faced a lot of violence this year, and our street outreach team is mentoring and walking with young men involved in the streets and trying to provide hope and healing for the future. We're also focused on mentoring, walking life on life with young people. And it's been amazing to see young people step up in 2020 and this year and really lead the way in feeding our communities, healing our communities, transforming public spaces. And so we're excited as we look to the future because we believe that we are indeed stronger together. So excited to build across Little Village, across Chicago, and at the national level. Love you guys and hope we have a great time together.
What's good, y'all? Jeremy from Village, Chicago, coming from the Windy City. And we're breaking barriers and building dreams by creating dynamic, transformational spaces for young men of color to be themselves and to be part of our families here and be connected to impactful opportunities. We're transforming our communities by really building the leaders of tomorrow. My name's Jeremy, and I'm my brother's keeper.
Tony D, your band father, here in Chicago, Illinois. Home of Deep Dish Pizza, home of the Chicago White Sox, home at Goitia's Martial Arts Academy, founder of the Youth Guidance Band Program, now in 8 cities across the world, where we show young men it's okay to use anger in a positive way, breaking barriers.
Hi, my name is Kevin, Haley High graduate, band program. I am my brother's keeper.
Hello, my name is Chris Goins of Mbk Chicago, home of President and Mrs. Obama. We are squarely focusing on increasing the number of men of color who become teachers because nationally, only 2% of the teaching force are men of color. We are my brother's keeper.
Chicago, Chicago. They do things that they don't do on Broadway. We love it. We love it. Great to see all that energy, all that momentum coming from our MBK communities. Continue to make noise at home. Continue to blow up the chat. I'm feeling fired up. I'm feeling inspired. How about you? And let's build on that momentum, everybody. Checking out what's happening across the country in our RISE program, the backbone organization for MBK in Richmond, California, and learn a little bit more about what they're doing, how they successfully supported young people to co-create programs and define their priorities. Let's turn it over to the RISE program in California.
My name is Sierra Gervais Gordon. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the Media Arts and Culture Manager at the RISE Youth Center.
Hi, my name is Adriana Avalos. I am a Youth RISE member and an intern for Poetry Amp.
I'm Sheila McKinney, and I'm a RISE member and the Youth Poet Laureate of Richmond, California.
My name is TJ Sykes. I'm the Member Engagement Coordinator at RISE Center.
My name is Roman Banks. I'm a member of the Youth RISE group. I'm a part of the men's group.
RISE Youth Organization is based in Richmond, California, and we have 4 main departments that really work to support youth at any avenue in their life. So we have our community health department, which supports with all of our mental health services, food services, things like that. We have education and justice, so that helps with, of course, school, but also our juvenile justice department, things of that nature. As well as supporting young folks with getting a job and things like that. We also have youth organizing, which is self-explanatory, but really creating that space for young folks to be at the forefront of these platforms, talking about what is important to them. And of course, we have Media Arts and Culture, which is a department that's focused on utilizing the arts as a healing mechanism.
I like the way that RISE partners with youth because they include us in everything, whether it's decision-making, workshops, or all of that stuff. It's just really amazing to see how it's, not just one-sided, it's both youth and adults. And I think that's so important, and RISE really embraces that because when we have discussions and conversations, it's not just, we're deciding this for the youth. It's, how does the youth feel about this? And it's kind of, asking us if we're comfortable with this or if we want to go through with something. And I think that is so important. And it's a partnership, and it's a relationship. It's not kind of a transactional one. It's one where it's genuine and natural instead of having to say, I did this for you, so you got to give me this back.
Being a RISE member, it's very comforting because it's a place where youth can go and just be yourself. The staff is super down to earth. Like, nobody I met has been like real rude or anything like that. It's just, they ask you how's your day? They ask you about your mental health. How are you doing? And that's really comforting. A lot of adults don't do that. They say what you're gonna do and they just direct you. And Rise is really just a place where you can be yourself and learn how to be comfortable with you.
It's a few identity-based groups that we have here at Rise Center, and the one that I facilitate is the Young Men's Group. And the way that I recruit young people for this is social media, word of mouth, referrals from different staff that interact with other young men that may not know me. They introduce them to me and things like that. And so within the space, we talk about these different aspects or topics like toxic masculinity, gun violence in our community, taught versus believe, like what were we taught about being men versus what we believe about being men. And we do these different activities around just really getting to know each other.
Ever since I've been in the group, I'm actually a new Rise member. I've only been in the group for about 2 to 3 weeks, but ever since I've joined, we've really been covering topics that's been hitting home, and some, like, a lot of stuff I can relate to, and I've been able to meet new people who actually like have around the same mindset as me, that's just looking to better themselves as young men. And I think that's what the Young Men's Group is all about, bettering yourself as a young man and not falling into stereotypes or just being your true self.
A core part of Rise programming is our identity groups, in addition to our other groups that really just allow folks to feel like they have a safe space to navigate different identities. Some of those, as you have heard before, is our Young Men's Group. In addition to that, we have our Sister Circle, which is the equivalent, allowing young ladies and femme-identifying folks to be able to share space to talk about the different things that we experience within this very ridiculous but beautiful world. In addition to that, we have our Alphabet Group, which is for our queer, trans identifying young folks to just have a safe space to talk about all the things that comes up. And then in addition to that, we have our racial identity group. So we have Tribe Ashe, which is for Black identifying youth, African identifying youth, and then we also have our Latinx identity group. Really just another space for folks to be able to talk about intersectionality, really all of the ways that we kind of exist within this world and all of the things that come with that, so that young folks feel seen, loved, and held as they move through this world. I am my brother's keeper.
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 Richmond, represent. Thank you so much to MBK Richmond for all your incredible work. And thank you to Mike, Tribune, Rashid, Jana, Michael, David, Lisa. I'll be thinking about your conversation for a while, especially the next time I open up Twitter.
Love that, Alejandro. That insightful conversation marks the end of our first Powerhouse main stage session. After this, don't go too far. Please join us for one of our 4 breakout sessions.